Having completed the passage from Instow via Falmouth to Plymouth, Mistress Q was in Plymouth Yacht Haven, preparing for the next passage from Plymouth across the English Channel to Alderney in the Channel Islands.
In addition to keeping a passage plan, noting the outline course, direction, main features along the way, weather and mileage as a quick check, I also keep a fairly accurate log noting our time, position, the weather conditions and any important information alongside that. Not least of all, jobs to be done. On this one, after 175 nautical miles, I've got a small list of jobs to be sorted out. The most serious of which are the engine mount nuts, which, although the engine mounts are new, the nuts have actually vibrated loose. I'll show you that in a moment.
The issue of the loose engine mount was far more serious than first thought, as the Volvo Penta engine with loose engine mounts nuts had dropped and was resting on the alternator, and the propeller shaft was out of alignment, which could have been catastrophic. Fortunately, Lewis from LH Marine was able to come to the next day and realign the engine and prop shaft, tighten the engine mount nuts and secure them with Loctite. For an hour's work, that was the best £50 I spent all trip. Thank you, Lewis. After a second night in the marina, Fergus joined me for the passage to Bray Harbour in Alderney, some 90 miles sailing overnight and crossing the TSS traffic separation scheme, which is 20 miles wide and has to be crossed at 90 degrees to the shipping lanes. It was a beautiful afternoon for sailing, with plenty of boats on the water to pace ourselves against. We launched the isometric cruising chute as soon as the wind was favourable and enjoyed the very best of sailing conditions as we prepared to cross the English Channel. Dolphins joined us on our passage as the sun started to slip below the horizon, and we prepared for our night watches, which were 3 hours on and 3 hours off. The TSS was busy, but by carefully timing our crossing, was completed without drama. By early the next morning, we were approaching Alderney just before high water, and avoiding the casquettes and the old sunken breakwater, followed our pilotage plan to the outer harbour at Bray, flying the Alderney courtesy flag and a yellow Q flag as required for customs clearance. We were met by the harbour master and directed to one of the few yellow visitor moorings available. Alderney is the most northerly of the Channel Islands, part of the Bailiwick of Guernsey, a British Crown dependency. It is just 3 miles long and 1.5 miles wide, and has a permanent population of around 2,000 people. Alderney is the site of the only Nazi concentration camps on British soil during World War II. Lager Sylt and Lager Norderney are a grim reminder of the German occupation, and many of the bunkers still remain. 6 Army Sailing Association boats made the crossing to Alderney. It was good to catch up with members that I have sailed with in the past. Needless to say, it was quite a social occasion. Sunday breakfast on Mistress Q was fresh ground coffee, warm croissants and homemade marmalade. Fantastic. It was great to meet the coxswain deck and crew of the Alderney Trent-class all-weather lifeboat Inner Wheel 2 at Bray Harbour, pictured with Mark, nicknamed Mole, who showed me around their boat. We also met several of the fundraising team holding a lifeboat day in the harbour. All too soon it was time to slip the mooring in Bray and head back overnight, the 90 miles to Plymouth. The weather forecast was good, with steady easterly winds allowing us to sail most of the way back, with Ray Marine ST2000 autotiller maintaining the course for us. Crossing the TSS was complicated, with vessels up to 4 abreast travelling at different speeds, needing accurate judgment whether to pass ahead or astern of each ship. One look at marine traffic will show you just how busy the English Channel can be. Once clear of the TSS, the spinner could be flown again, giving us some fantastic sailing back towards Plymouth. Sunrise the following day saw us off Salcombe and our final track along the coast to Plymouth, arriving in the early afternoon. So here we are, back in Plymouth Yacht Haven. And Plymouth Yacht Haven has become something of a second home for Mistress Q, as this is our preferred stop if we're in Plymouth on the south coast. And we've just made a really good passage back from Alderney in the Channel Islands overnight with strengthening force 3, force 4 winds from the southeast pushing us along, and we managed to sail for 20 out of the 24 hours it took us to complete the passage. And the last few miles into the breakwater at Plymouth were under cruising shoot, which always makes for a spectacular sight and some good video footage. So the reason for the stop this time in Plymouth is to change my crew and also wait for an improving weather situation, as for the next few days we've got the tail end of Hurricane Erin pushing through from the southwest with some high winds, force 6, force 8, but it's not so much the winds, it's the sea state which is making me cautious, particularly around Land's End and the North Cornwall coast. The swell is going to be well over 3.5 metres. And in fact, there have been warnings put out for people on the beaches as well to be wary of spring tides and strong waves. So here we are, the boat is cleaned down. I'm going to sort myself out now, and then join me again in 2 or 3 days' time for the final passage back to Instow. See you later. In the event, a couple of days became a week in Plymouth Yacht Haven with persistent high winds and huge seas off Land's End until I could continue to Falmouth. Now sailing single-handed as I had lost my crew. The day started fair, but quickly turned wet with strengthening westerly wind right on the nose. An easy 8-hour sail turned into a 12-hour challenge, and it was with some relief that I eventually passed St Anthony Head into Carrick Roads and Falmouth. So, despite a good passage from Plymouth over here to Falmouth, the narrow weather window that I was looking at to get around Land's End rapidly closed, with force 8 gales forecast, so I've had no option but to stay over here for 2 or 3 nights. However, this evening it looks as though it's clearing up, and there is an opportunity with favourable tides to clear both the Lizard and Land's End before turning north back up the Bristol Channel. So I'm about to get some supper and then my head down for a few hours before we slip here early hours tomorrow morning. To make my tidal gate at the Lizard and Land's End meant a 2 a.m. departure from Falmouth, so I warned my neighbours in Falmouth Haven Marina I would be leaving early. Once the sun rose in the east, the day warmed up and the passage was set fair for Land's End. The Longship's Light is a familiar landmark for many sailors, and the conditions were good, even if the sea was a little bit lumpy. Turning north parallel to the TSS, the westerly wind filled the sails for a really memorable sail up the North Cornwall coast. Well, 14 hours into this passage from Falmouth back to Instow, I'm just off St Agnes Head, which puts me about halfway through this, what will be about a 28-hour passage in total. So far so good, been a few issues but nothing to complain about. The weather has been fair actually, a little bit rolly, especially around Land's End, and I've managed to sail most of the way and all the afternoon. Only now am I looking as though it just may run out of wind before nightfall, but fingers crossed we can get most of the way back home under sail. So I'll leave you with a view of St Agnes Head. Far from dying down, the wind actually strengthened and I was able to make good progress even against the adverse tide off Padstow. At nightfall the moon came up, making my continued passage easier to manage with good visibility. I enjoy sailing at night and don't mind being single-handed. I don't sleep as such, but grab a few minutes shut-eye in the cockpit, setting an alarm on the AIS and radar. The main worry on the North Cornwall and Devon coast is the multitude of fishing pots with small pickup buoys, often almost impossible to see, but a real hazard if you get caught in the lines. My passage north was quicker than planned and I arrived off the Fairway buoy at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was still dark. Fortunately the channel is well lit and the leading lights are visible for miles. The only danger is the mooring buoys in the estuary where a powerful torch is essential. I found my mooring and closed the boat down, making my way ashore. The final shot of this video tells its own story. The boat is packed down, the tender's put away, all the bags are waiting here at North Devon Yacht Club for my lift back home. See you next time. In summary, the 132-mile passage from Falmouth took 29 hours, 1 hour quicker than planned. And the Channel Island trip was certainly the highlight of this year's sailing season. Join me again for another adventure with Mistress Q.